So I couldn't recommend using native Australian ingredients anymore at home. It's a fantastic, unique ingredient that is Australia. It is the flavors of Australia, but they are difficult to come across. I do understand that completely, and they are expensive. And for good reason, to pay communities directly to harvest these food, most of it grows in the wild, so it's not cultivated, so it's much more difficult to get these ingredients. And I think it's a really important thing that the communities that are gathering these native Australian foods are being paid properly for their time and for their hard work. So, there's a few companies that I really like to buy our native Australian ingredients from. Outbackchef.com.au is a great website to visit. Jude Mellor is a fantastic advocate of sustainable Australian ingredients. She has her own farm that she started, so she is starting to cultivate some of these ingredients down here in Victoria. So she's great to hit up, or the Australian Superfood Company. Now that's a company that is absolutely fantastic. They're based here in Melbourne, but they do a lot of freeze-dried products. So when the ingredients are abundant, these ingredients have very short seasons, so you have to make the most of it when they're around. So the team at Australian Superfood Co, they freeze dry, and you can buy their products as powders that are full on in flavor, really delicious. And they last really well, and you only need a really small amount, goes a really long way. So that's probably one of the most cost-effective ways to introduce these ingredients to your home cooking. Career highlights. I've been really lucky that I've got to do a lot of really cool things around Australia and around the world. I think getting involved with the world's 50 best when they were here in Australia, with Miller being one of the major sponsors, was really awesome. Getting to cook for some of the best chefs in the world. I got to cook for the press conference the morning of the event, which is a huge thing. Joe and I and a few of our team stayed up all night to make sure we had fresh croissants and pastries for everyone. A little bit silly, but we just wanted to make a really good impression. Speaking at Food on the Edge, which is a big food symposium in Galway in Ireland last year, was a really big thing for me. It's a real industry focused event, but speaking with some of my colleagues from around the world that I've admired for a long time and talking about things that we've done was a really big thing. Winning GQ Chef of the Year last year, or for 2020, it was really huge and really unexpected. Being in a room with huge celebrities. Joe was sitting next to Sophie Monk, and all these people you've seen on telly for years around. That was very overwhelming and very cool. I've never really considered myself a man of style in that regard, but it was recognized on my cooking abilities, which was great. And in terms of things that I've mastered, we don't really have signature dishes as such. I kind of cook to where I am, to the ingredients that are around me. So I never really carry dishes with me for too long, but I think in terms of mastering techniques, I think fermentation has been a really big thing. It's taken us a long time to be able to make really awesome salamis, really awesome cheese, and making things like miso has been a really cool thing for us to master. So inoculating grains with the koji to make the first fermentation, and then cooking it with the pulses to make a miso to get beautiful, deep, rich flavors that are really hard to find and can make simple ingredients shine. So yeah, I think fermentation has been a really big one. I can't speak for other cooks, but personally, I don't like bloody beef at all. I'm not a huge rare fan. I'm more of a medium rare sort of person. I think, I like the meat to be pink, depending on the cut of beef, of course. Like a sirloin or a scotch or a ribeye or something like that. I like it to be pink the whole way through, but not flabby and rare. So you achieve that by warming the meat before you cook it. That helps bring up the temperature. Cooking it nicely and resting is the key to making sure the meat's not bloody. General rule of thumb is rest the meat as long as you've cooked it for, and then you can warm it again from there. If you're taking a steak straight from the barbecue or the grill and cutting it up, it's going to bleed everywhere. It's going to dry out. It's not going to be nice and succulent. So resting the meat is definitely key. You can always warm it again from there. Once you've cooked it, rested it, you can always give it another little flash, either back on the grill or the barbecue, just to warm it up again. A warm sauce always helps. And in terms of eggs, I don't love super runny eggs at all. I like the yolks to be set enough that when you cut into them, it kind of oozes out like a gooey volcano of egg yolk. If you cut it and it runs out straight away, for me, that's a little bit underdone. I like it so when you cut it, it just kind of slowly just oozes out. It's nice and warm. It's semi-cooked. It's not too runny. So, I can't speak for any other cooks around, but, that's how I like to do it for sure. Duck legs are a great ingredient to use. You know, very classic in French cuisine, of course. You know, the confit ducks, something that you see in restaurants a lot, something that's been around for a very, very long time. But having that much duck fat at home is either very expensive, it's very messy, so that's kind of hard to do. So what I suggest you do is get your duck legs, and I like to salt them first. So, you know, just as if you were seasoning a piece of meat, but a little bit more, kind of sprinkle that all over the duck, both sides. You can introduce some pepper, some grated orange, some thyme leaves, whatever flavors you're looking for. And then let them sit in a container overnight. And what that'll do, that'll cure the duck leg. So it'll bring out all of the extra moisture. It'll set the flesh really nicely. So when you braise it, it doesn't go mushy. It stays really nice and firm, but tender in a way, if that kind of makes sense. And then I would braise them. So, you know, if you wanted to do a European method, you could cook off some vegetables with some red wine, add some stock, seal off your duck legs. You can do that in the same pot first, is a nice way. So get your pot, seal the duck legs, take them out, and then add your vegetables, and that'll kind of collect all of those caramelized little bits from the duck legs. Add some wine, red wine if you have it, white wine, doesn't matter. Add your stock, and then you can braise them on the stovetop for a little while. You could transfer that liquid and veggies and duck to a pan and finish it in the oven. That's probably a little bit of a safer way, just because it's a bit more of a controlled heat. Or alternatively, you could use some Chinese flavors. You could use some star anise, some ginger, some orange, some soy sauce, fish sauce, you know, any of those kind of things. So find the flavors that you want. But the real key for me is salting the duck legs first. That ensures that you get a really beautiful texture. Make sure you seal them mostly on the fat side to render out some of the fat, because they are quite fatty in the skin, and you get beautiful flavor, and then braise them from there. Poaching eggs isn't easy, I'll be completely honest. It took me a long time to get it right. There's a million different techniques you can read about, heaps of different ways of doing it. I think, you know, it seems like you've practiced a lot, so maybe saying practice makes perfect won't work here. But one of my biggest tips that'll really make a difference is fresh eggs. The fresher your eggs are, the better the protein structure is in the white, and that's what will give you that really nice oval shaped firm white on the outside. The older your eggs are, the weaker the protein bonds are. So that's when they'll kind of fall apart when poaching. So when Joe and I started at Oakridge, one of the main appeals for us to go there in the first place was having space. The space to grow food and have vegetable gardens. So to be honest, I'd never heard of Oakridge. I'd never even been to the Yarra Valley. I'd driven through to go to the caviar farm a few years prior to me starting, but I never really knew anything about the area. We're approached to go there, and you know, I started cooking in a winery restaurant in Margaret River in Western Australia nearly 17 years ago, quite a while ago. So the appeal was there for me to get back into that environment, you know, the environment where I fell in love with cooking. So, you know, our main request when we went to Oakridge is that we could start a vegetable garden. So we ended up with 3 gardens now. We have a huge garden that's at the back of the car park. We have a smaller garden behind the winery. We have a really large greenhouse, and we have some herb and flower gardens on the side of the restaurant. So that was the big appeal. We knew a little bit about gardening, but Adrian Guerin, our gardener at work, has really kind of led the way. We kind of collaborate on what we want. He says, no, that won't work. I'll ask for crazy ingredients that grow in tropical environments, and he'll say, Matt, no, we're in the Yarra Valley. Let's grow food that'll work. So we've come to a really nice point where through summer we can grow about 70% of our vegetables, and through winter it's probably around 30 to 40%, just depending on the year. Absolutely. Jo started to upload some cheese making videos to her Instagram page, and we're working on some other content that'll be available shortly. It's a difficult one, I guess, in terms of size of the potatoes, size of the leg of lamb. You know, a leg of lamb will generally take a lot longer than a potato to cook. So what I could suggest you do is get your potatoes, leave them quite chunky. If they're large, maybe cut them in half. If they're small, maybe leave them whole. And get a butterflied leg of lamb. So a leg of lamb that's had the bone removed, and that way you can kind of spread it out. You can get some nice flavors in there. You can marinate it with some nice herbs or spices, whatever you like. And then I would put the potatoes in the base of the tray, dress them with some olive oil and some salt and pepper, move them all around so they're nicely evenly coated. And then I'd put the leg of lamb over the top. So instead of cooking a large cylindrical piece of lamb, you've got a butterfly piece, so it'll cook more evenly. On the slow cooking setting, that would be great. So I'd cook it till, you can put a knife or a pin into the potatoes and they're tender, till the lamb, has a nice bounce to it. I personally don't like it too well done. I like it just pink, but definitely, cooked and set, not rare by any means. I don't like rare lamb at all. And then, at the very end of the cook, when everything's nice and tender, you can just blast it under the grill, just to get a little bit of extra caramelization, all those crispy edges on everything. I think that, that technique should work pretty well. For cooking a casserole in the oven without the stovetop, caramelizing and searing that meat at the beginning is a really important part to developing great flavor through your casserole. So what I would suggest you do is in your casserole dish, put it in the oven, put the grill on at the start, so dress all of the meat with some oil and seasoning. Get the grill, get the meat caramelizing under that, stirring it. You'll get a bit of sticking into your casserole dish as well, which is not a bad thing. You'll get nice flavor from that. So kind of get a nice blast, get a nice sear on it. Deglaze it with some wine or stock to get all of that caramelization off the pan, because that's all beautiful flavor. And then from there, add your vegetables, add your stock, add your lid, and cook it from there. Cooking a roast chook is quite a challenge. You'd be amazed at how many chefs and cooks struggle to roast chicken beautifully. But for me, it's one of the greatest joys you could ever eat. A roast chook and veggies, a glass of wine is an absolute treat. So the best way I find to roast a chook is to bring it from the fridge, sort of half an hour to an hour before you're going to roast it. That helps bring the temperature up in the chook. I like to cut a lemon in half, cut a head of garlic in half, stuff it inside the cavity. Truss up the chicken, which you can find a lot of videos online on the exact technique of that. There's a few different ways you can go about it. And then I like to crank my oven, about 200, 220, depending on what oven you do have. Get the chook, give it a nice sort of rub around with some oil, get lots of salt on there, pepper if you like it, and then blast it for about 15 to 20 minutes at a really high temperature, 200. That way you should get a beautiful caramelization around the bird to get that really golden, beautiful roasted chicken, fragrance and color going on, which is really yummy. And then drop the oven temp down to around 150 and cook it for another sort of 20, 30, 40 minutes, depending on the size of the bird. And then make sure you give it a really nice rest. Just like any other piece of meat, a chicken needs to have a rest after cooking. So what I do is bring it out, poke into the thigh bone, where the thigh and the drumstick meet, just poke in there with a knife. If the juices run clear, you're good to go. So leave the chicken to rest for around 20 minutes. Of course, it'll cool down in that time. I don't like to cover it because it stays really hot, stays cooking, and you lose that crispy skin. So I just leave it to chill out. I leave the oven on the low temp, let it come right down in temperature, then give it another little flash for sort of 5 or 10 minutes to warm it up again. Carve and serve from there. Beautiful.